Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now let's continue discussing the tragedy in Jagersfontein in the Free State. Hundreds of homes were washed away when a mine dam wall burst. Residents are now being advised to avoid contact with floodwater. Let's discuss this further with Anja du Plessis. She is a professor from Unisa's Geography Department. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time here on All Angles and on ENCA. Now, first of all, yesterday I saw not just residents, but even politicians as well, who were going there to assess what happened in Jagersfontein. They were even walking barefoot in this particular sludge. Is this advisable?
First of all, my sympathies go out to all of the communities that has been affected by this disaster. To answer your question, I wouldn't advise that. The sludge mostly comprises of wastewater and then obviously sediment from the broken mine tailings dam. This tailings is usually acidic and can contain high concentrations of heavy metals, and then as well as arsenic, mercury, and other toxic substances. So for people to walk around barefoot, I would not recommend that at this point in time, especially that we don't really know what is within that sludge at this point in time.
And when you talk about toxicity in the sludge, I also think about, the environment, the fact that people need to breathe, obviously. So what happens then,
Well, in terms of the environmental effects, I mean, it's a disaster in terms of environmental damage, and then you also have your human health hazards. But for us to address this, we first have to look at the quantity as well as the characteristics of the waste, but then also the rate at which the waste has been discharged into affected water bodies or within river systems. And then we also have to look at the effectiveness of cleanup procedures. But your primary environmental impacts will obviously include affecting the flow and patterns of surrounding streams and rivers. Water bodies will be contaminated. You will also have the contamination of food chains and your drinking water. The soils will also be polluted and be affected. That can, at the end of the day, affect people's livelihoods. And then you also have the pollution of the surface water, but then also the groundwater resources, if people make use of that, because the wastes and the heavy metals and whatever could seep into your groundwater resources. So the negative implications of this is widespread, especially within your freshwater biota as well, directly affecting the fish and then the invertebrates and then other biodiversity within the area.
I'm just thinking about all the inhalation of, whatever toxicity may come from that. I mean, a mine uses quite heavy industrial products. But let's talk about the fact that we saw the substation, or we're hearing from government officials that the substation was in fact also washed away. So that means no electricity. What does that then mean for the wastewater infrastructure?
Well, that at the end of the day will contribute to your sewage pollution as well. That's if the wastewater treatment plants actually function. But with the cut of power for that whole community, that will obviously affect their wastewater treatment, and then the water infrastructure is most probably damaged as well.
And waterborne diseases, is that also a huge issue?
Look, at this point in time, yes, it can be, but I think the main concern would first be to try and determine what is contained within the sludge so that they know what toxic substances are within it. Waterborne diseases will hopefully be low, but that will depend on how the community manages this. My primary advice would be just to not make contact with the sludge at all, not to drink any water. Hopefully the government there, the local government, will supply these people with water for them to drink, and so that we can limit waterborne diseases.
I mean, you're saying that the communities around there should, for instance, just trade with precaution whenever they make any contact with the water or the sludge in the area. Wouldn't the solution right now be for government to remove everybody who's there from the area? I know that it's their home and it's all that they know, but it's going to affect their health quite badly. So wouldn't the solution rather be that nobody lives there for a couple of months or weeks or whatever, however long it may take until the area is back to normal?
Well, that would be the best solution at this point in time, to try and remove the population out of danger and from this disaster, so that the government and their departments can actually investigate what is within the sludge by taking water samples, and then also doing the cleanup. I don't think the community should be there while they are trying to clean up this mess. It would be safer for them if they are relocated to a safe area.
And the fact that there's very little information that we have right now, Prof, what would you say, what would you advise, for instance, engineers and environmentalists to start with when it comes to this area? We don't have much information, and I think because it's not really something that happens a lot in South Africa, you know, we're still learning how to deal with this particular issue.
Look, at this point in time, I think the first step that we need to take is, as you say, try to remove the people there so that we do not have the issue of, you know, them being exposed to waterborne diseases as well as the toxic substance. But then in terms of what should be done, I think that sampling should be done at a manner of urgency at this point, because we don't know what is exactly within the sludge. So as soon as we try to determine what is within the sludge, they will be able to take necessary precautions and then also determine what clean-up practices would be well suited for this.
And I guess also the one important thing is for Eskom to try and keep up to their promise of having electricity restored in that area by tomorrow, so that at least things start to work. Because if you don't have electricity, you can't even possibly use the machinery to do the cleanup.
Exactly. So that is another major issue. The blackout of that area is a big problem because, as you say, first of all, the wastewater treatment plants won't work. Most of the infrastructure as well, your pumping, it requires electricity. So I'm hoping with you then that the Eskom then tries to restore the area's power so that they can actually implement clean-up processes and try to help the people there.
All right. Thank you so much, Prof, for speaking to us. I know that there's not much information right now, so you know, I would have loved to ask you more questions, but I don't know. Do you have any idea what could be, you know, in the sludge? Like, what kind of toxicities should they be testing for? Because we know toxicology reports can take, I believe, years. You know, unless government fast tracks it. What should they be testing for right now so that they don't have to test for everything?
Well, look, at this point in time, we have to test for toxicity. So the primary thing that I would look at is arsenic, mercury, and then obviously your primary toxic substances like your heavy metals, lead, things that can have like a major environmental as well as human health impact. But I mean, to say that toxicity results will take a year, I don't think that's an option at this point in time. It has to be made a priority. And I'm sure that labs will be able to assist government and try to increase the turnover or shorten the turnover of the test results.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Prof, for speaking to us. That is Professor Anja du Plessis from the Department of Geography at the University of South Africa.